Books in the World is an interview show produced by the Cape Cod Writers Center and the Cape Media Center. The Writers Center was established over 6 decades ago and sponsors a 4-day writers conference every summer on Cape Cod. The goal of Books in the World is to show how writers, illustrators, publishers, editors, and others in the literary field play their roles in the world of books and other communication media. This show has been broadcast continuously since 1978, making it the longest-running program of its kind in the United States. Today we're delighted to welcome Crystal King, author of In the Garden of Monsters. Welcome, Crystal.
Thanks for having me.
Full disclosure, I met Crystal at Grub Street, the Boston-based writing collaborative, one of the various places where she teaches or has taught, and of which I'm a longtime member. All right, let's get into it. Italy, Italian cuisine, sexual attraction, history, a mysterious mansion, ghosts, and surrealism. We have Greek mythology in an Italian Roman garden with Americans and Salvador Dali. Such a bundle of ingredients.
And the garden's a real place.
And the garden is a real place. And was that where the story started in your mind, or when learning about the garden, or?
It is,
what's the
sort
genesis
of.
of it?
So during the pandemic, I was working on a novel. My agent was trying to sell a historical fiction novel set in the Renaissance, and we were struggling to sell it. And I was frustrated, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Chris Walder, who writes Gothic novels. And she had a novel that had just come out called Unnatural Creatures about the women of Frankenstein. And I was lamenting to her my frustration about not being able to sell this Renaissance book. And she said, well, Gothics are hot right now. And I thought to myself, well, if I were going to write a Gothic, what would I write? And immediately this garden I had been to 2 years before came to my mind. I had no intention when I visited to write any book set there, but I thought, this is it, I have to do it. And the garden's a real place. It's in Bomarzo, Italy, and it's set in a valley below a palazzo that is, there's this medieval village that just tumbles down from above where the Palazzo, the Castello, the castle on the hill really, is at. And this prince, a Orsini prince in the late 1500s created this garden.
1500s. Okay.
Yeah, so 1540 to 1590 or something like, or maybe a little bit later than that. And when he died, he created the garden, and the stones are all monsters and statues and Greek gods, and it's just this wild, crazy place. He built it to shock and awe his guests. But then when he died, the garden was overgrown for almost 400 years. And then what happened is that in the 30s and 40s, these surrealist artists started going there, and these poets and these artists, so Jean Cocteau went there, and so did Salvador Dali. And Salvador Dali filmed this little tiny movie. It's only 3 minutes long. You can see it on my website, crystalking.com. And he was just inspired by this garden. He was filming, he was creating sets for the Rome Opera, and even some of the sets reflect some of the mouth of the monster, which is on the
cover,
on the book.
Yeah, very cleverly.
This is actually a statue that's in the garden. There's a mouth that's considered to be the mouth of hell.
And this is where they have the dinners and
yes,
things.
There's a few dinners.
Very important mouth there.
If you're looking at the mouth of this monster, it's called the Orco or ogre. And there's also an ancient god called Orcus, who is kind of a counterpart to Hades. And but it's like the mouth of hell is what this monster is. And it says ogni pensiero vola on the top of the mouth, basically, and it means all thoughts fly. And that's because if you're in the monster's mouth, and the mouth has a table inside that looks like a tongue when you're standing away from it. It seats about 4 people. But if you're in the mouth of the monster and you're whispering, but somebody else is standing down the path, they can hear every word that's said inside the monster. So
all thoughts fly.
All thoughts fly.
All words fly.
Yes. So that was the inspiration for it. And then there's all these Greek gods that are already in the garden. There's Persephone. There's a bench that's her bench. The Demeter or Ceres. I use the Roman names, so Proserpina is Persephone, Ceres is Demeter, and then Hades is Pluto in Roman mythology. So.
And Hades is also our name for hell, but it's also the name of a person, of a god.
Yes,
right?
correct.
And it is that Hades, is the underworld that you refer to, is that a hell or is that something else?
They're different. So in Greek mythology, the idea of hell was somewhat different. And our idea of hell actually comes a lot from what Dante put together in the Renaissance and the idea of the 7 layers of hell, which is somewhat based on Greek mythology in some ways. There were certain places in the underworld where people were punished. There were parts of the underworld where kind of like what our limbo was in Catholicism. And then there's the Elysium Fields, which is like what we would consider to be heaven. But Hades was the brother of Zeus and the brother of Demeter. And so what's interesting is the myth of Hades and Persephone is actually a Sicilian myth, because Hades was thought to have lived underneath Mount Etna. And so one day he saw Persephone, this young maiden, gathering flowers at the base of Mount Etna. And he said, I want her. And he asks his brother Zeus, who's the god of every god, and says, can I have this woman? And
Can I have your daughter?
yeah, well, it wasn't his daughter, but it was his sister's daughter.
Sister's daughter, okay.
But also Hades' sister's daughter. It was his niece, essentially.
His niece, right.
Yes.
Niece.
Yeah, because all the Greek gods were very incestuous. There weren't very many of them. So, he and Zeus says, sure, go for it. And he takes her. The myths there are some myths that differ on it. Most of them say that he forcefully removed her from the world. There's lots of Renaissance art, for example, about the rape of Persephone or Proserpina. Bernini has this beautiful statue in the Villa Borghese, for example, of Pluto taking Proserpina down to the underworld. But there are some myths that have it be more of a love story. And in modern times, it's a little more of a love story. But the counterpart to this is Demeter, the mother, Hades' sister, and the mother of Persephone, is very upset about her daughter going missing in the traditional myth. And so she blankets the world with snow. And all of a sudden, people start dying, and livestock starts dying, and Zeus says, we can't do this. You can't destroy humanity.
Because she is the god of food and
of
agriculture.
the harvest, and
right.
and so
the mother. Yeah.
Right, and she's Mother Nature, really.
Okay. Yeah.
And so Zeus says, you can't do that, and she says, bring my daughter back. And Hades says, I would love to give you, I would give your daughter back, but she's eaten some pomegranate seeds. And some of the myths say 3, and some say 6. And so I run with 6 in my book because it serves the plot best. And then that's the story of the seasons. So when she is underground, it's winter time. When she's almost coming back to the world, it's spring, and Demeter is getting excited that her daughter's coming back. In the summer, she's returned. In the fall, she's getting ready to go back into the underworld.
So this alternates back and
Yes.
forth through the centuries.
Yes, but it's really the Greek myth of the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't stay with that myth, I play around with it, and I don't want to give too many spoilers about that.
Yeah, right. Okay, right. All right. And you said Gothic. Tell me, what defines Gothic?
So Gothic has a lot to do with place and setting, where the setting in the story is very much almost a character in itself. Okay, yeah. And it's often, there's sort of a surreal, ghosty, creepy factor involved, not on horror. Horror is like more blood and guts and things like that. And Gothic can have some of that, but it tends to be more mystical and more supernatural. And so in this particular story, you've got the creepy castle on the hill.
You got the castle.
You have the really weird garden down below.
Right.
And so both of those places are a real setting in the book.
Very much characters, yes. All right. So let's get to the story itself. It's the first few pages. It's 1547 in Italy, and Iadonius?
Adonis. Yeah.
Adonis wins Julia's trust over a cherry rose tart. They take a walk, the sexual tension begins and continues throughout the novel. We get a hint that these two have parted and reunited multiple times, and then we move immediately 3 or 4 pages later to 1948, soon after World War II, as Italy is recovering from the war and surrealism is reaching its high point.
Yes, it's 100 years this year for surrealism.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. So attraction, chemistry, you pull the reader along, and you keep, page by page, you're dialing up the sexual tension. And it flows in many directions. It's not explicit. It's very classy, but it's very sensual.
It's a very romantic book.
Very romantic. Yes. Ignacio towards Julia, Jack, the American cowboy you brought in here, towards Julia. Julia towards Jack, Dali's wife, Gala, also towards Jack. Paolo and Lillian, Julia back towards Ignacio.
There's a lot of love going on in this book, yes.
It's a lot of it. There's a passage I'd like you to read, if you would.
So for people tuning in that are not familiar with the story, it's a story of Hades and Persephone, but it's told from the point of view of a model that Salvador Dali brings to this garden. So that kind of helps set the stage a little bit.
Right. And how does he pick her as a model, or how was she chosen?
She's working at the academia. She was a student there and an artist, and she models to help pay the bills. And
Right,
so
okay.
he had heard about her from somebody, and she's not sure how. So.
All right. And
Great.
Ignacio is the
host, and so Julia, who
of the castle where they've all gone to do the painting.
correct, the Orsini Palazzo, and Julia is the main character of the book, and she is the model that Salvador Dali has brought. And this scene takes place right after they have arrived at the Palazzo, and she has met. So she has come to the Palazzo with Salvador Dali and Gala, his wife, and then there are 2 other individuals, Paolo, who is the cameraman, and Jack, who is this burly guy next door. He was a footballer and he was in the army, and he helped in World War II to retake for the Americans to basically help liberate Rome, and
he is in the story to help Dali with his painting
correct.
and his setups and all this
and
stuff.
really as a love interest for
Yes,
Gala
okay.
and Dali, and then eventually Julia. So, Julia, may I speak with you? Ignacio asked as we trekked up the long stretch of road toward the Orsini Palazzo. Sure, I said, although my heart had already begun to pound with his nearness. He fell in step with me, waiting till Paolo and Jack were some distance ahead of us before he began to speak. They told me you felt an earthquake when you were in the garden, he said finally. See, I did. So did Jack, but the others said they didn't feel it. I don't know how. It was quite strong. I felt it too. I looked at him shocked. You did? But the others didn't. He gave me a dark, sly smile. I am more accustomed to the unusual nature of the garden than they are. Where were you when it happened? In front of the statue of the woman with the mossy legs and the vase of flowers on her head. I didn't want to tell him how I knew her name. He nodded. It seemed to be the answer he expected. I regret that the boschetto, which means the little wood, wasn't kind to you today. I imagine fainting in the mouth of the orco, the ogre, then feeling an earthquake so shortly after must have left you unnerved. He sounded truly sympathetic, and despite my better judgment, I warmed to him a little. You haven't eaten much today. You must be famished, he said. My belly rumbled then, and I hoped he couldn't hear it. I am. There will be a big feast tonight. Partridge, pheasant, perhaps a little pollo al diavolo. The devil's chicken. My breath caught, although I shouldn't have been taken as off guard as I was. It was a common Italian dish I had eaten many times before. It derived its name from its spicy nature and because it was traditionally cooked over coals, not because of any sinister association. Are you the devil? The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. I don't know what provoked me to be so coy, and I could only hope it came out as a joke. I dared a glance at him. Only if you want me to be, Julia, he replied with a wink. My jaw dropped a little, and I paused, unsure what to make of such a clear, brazen suggestion. Julia, are you all right? Jack asked me as we entered the palazzo, "You look like you've seen another ghost." I shut my mouth and strengthened my resolve. "I'm swell, really."
So is he the devil? Aha.
Well, yes, Ignazio. The readers aren't really sure. Well, I'm
Right.
pretty sure the readers figure out very quickly who he is, but he is this host that is extraordinarily attractive, like unnaturally so. And Gala is very interested in him, and Julia is very attracted to him as well. But it's also, it's very alarming, this attraction that she has
Right.
for him.
She's fearful. And his touch, which you mention all the time, often, sorry, often.
It's very hot.
He's very hot. I mean, literally hot, not sexy hot, just hot.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very hot-bodied person. And that is part of the attraction and the repulsion for her, too. When he gets near, she gets excited, but if he touches her, she
Yeah, and there's just something just unnatural about him, you know, and the way that he is with her, he seems to know things about her that is very alarming to her.
Indeed, indeed. We know his mission is to get Proserpina to eat pomegranate seeds, and if she does, what will occur? If you can reveal some of that.
Well, so this is the thing. I can't really tell you too much because it reveals
It reveals too much.
It
Okay.
reveals too much. And the thing is I've changed things too. So, but I can talk about how Salvador Dali wants her to eat the pomegranate
Right,
seeds.
that too. Yeah.
Because, so Dali has brought her there he wants to paint her as Proserpina, as Persephone. And so in his mind, he's also got the idea that she probably is Persephone.
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps trying to get her to eat these pomegranate seeds over and over
And
and
he keeps
over.
calling her Persephone.
Yes, and he is just convinced in his mind that's who she is. And she's like, "You are paying me to be here, a very handsome sum, and I don't know what your obsession with the pomegranate seeds is." And she doesn't actually like them. And so there's this push-pull where he really wants her to eat these, and she's like, "You're just a nut. What is going on with you?" So, yeah.
And Ignacio, who's not just the host but also the chef.
Well, he's not.
He oversees the
Yes,
chef
he oversees the chef.
and keeps inserting pomegranate seeds.
Yes, there's pomegranate seeds
All
in
these
all the
dishes.
dinners,
Right.
and there's lots of food in this book. So if anyone who is watching has read my previous novels, my books have been about culinary figures in Italian history. And this particular novel is not about a culinary figure, but there is so much food in it. It just made sense with the pomegranate seeds.
Yeah.
And I got to play with all these historical eras in history with the food. So there's a dish that's right out of medieval times in the Hypnero Tamachia Polifili, which is this medieval novel of this man whose lover jilted him, and he had a dream that he was trying to get her back. And there's this crazy feast that appears in this novel, and where all the servers, every time there's a new course, all the tablecloths change color, and the servers' clothes change color, and the dishes are all made of precious stones and of the same color, and the food is just very elaborate. And I thought, that's a cool idea. I'm going to have that dinner
did do that,
in
yes,
there.
yes,
And so.
yeah.
And then Salvador Dali had a cookbook that came out in 1973. And so I toyed with the idea that he'd been thinking about this cookbook in 1948. So there's a meal that born from Salvador
He
Dali's
insists on certain
imagination.
foods, right.
But Ignazio is the one that helps orchestrate all of this, very definitely. And
Yeah.
he wants her to eat the pomegranate seeds too, but and so does Dali. And so Julia's like, why? What's going on here?
And she slipped them under her tongue. She spits them away.
Yes,
hides them. Yeah,
and her friend Lillian comes and visits to the palazzo in the middle of the book. You meet her at the beginning, and she comes later. And there's times when Lillian tries to like take the seed for her and everything. But that's a lot of push pull in the book, is these pomegranate seeds
Sure.
that you know because if you eat the pomegranate seeds, then you're stuck in the underworld in the traditional myth. And so what happens? My myth is very different, so eating the pomegranate seeds has a different outcome. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. That's great. I made a note to myself in the margin once that the only way to read this book is over dinner, I think, because otherwise you'd be constantly getting up for snacks.
Well, the funny thing is I actually have a companion cookbook that you can download from my website.
Fantastic.
And I worked
Fantastic.
with these food historians and
Yeah.
these food bloggers and chefs to create this, and so you can recreate the dishes of the book. So it's great for book clubs, for example, because then you can all like do one of the dishes.
Yeah,
and,
great. This is on crystalking.com.
Yep, crystalking.com.
Okay,
But it's
great,
super fun because the food is so good.
Yeah. And the meals were astounding. I mean, do people eat that way with like 17 courses? I mean, there's just 15 different meats you put in one meal and 30 fruits.
Well, I've
and
been to Michelin star restaurants where you eat like 20 courses, so maybe not on this level, but yes,
Yeah,
this is very extravagant.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
But in the Renaissance and in different eras in time, you would eat like that because you had money and you were trying to show it off.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. Have you sampled a lot of the things in the book?
yes.
Have you tried to cook any of them?
Yes. Yeah, there's recipes in the back of the book that myself and my husband Joe, who loves to cook, we've created. So
Great,
there's
great.
so there's 3 recipes in the book: an appetizer, gilded chicken, a gold chicken, and then a ricotta pie. So
Fantastic. Need to go around to Michael's right now. So and the cookbook online, it's a free cookbook.
yes, you can download it for free.
Okay. And the recipes are by several sources?
Yes, there's some Boston chefs, there's some food bloggers and food historians that have, like one of the food historians is somebody who does ice cream, and flavors from history inspire her ice cream. So
No kidding. Wow.
really wild, fun stuff. Yeah. So
Go back to a couple of particulars in the book again. You make Dali into an absolute madman. Now, maybe he was.
he kind of was. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And his wife, Gala, is a horrible, horrible person.
So it's interesting. So Dali was a very strange individual. He was a narcissist. He was very controversial in his time. He was kicked out of the Surrealists for having racist views, and for being he was a sympathizer with Franco and with Hitler. He has a painting that he painted later on in his life of Hitler masturbating, for example. Right. So he was somebody who was very problematic. He was also very charismatic. He was a narcissist. He was a showman. Everything he did was to shock people. And he loved attention. He loved it. And so that was his modus operandi for everything. But he was also a genius. And he was he was one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. So I play a lot with this problematic nature, and Julia has to figure out how to deal with this really awful, but interesting, and sometimes kind, but not really person. So how do you do that? And then his wife, Gala, she was really interesting. He worshipped the ground she walked on. From the moment he met her until her death, they were in their 80s, and he painted her over and over. She was his muse. She was his business manager. She managed their finances, and the reason that he was as successful as he was because of her, absolutely. But they had this bizarre relationship. She had many paramours. He said very famously that he had only had sex twice, once with Gala, and it was overrated. It was overrated, and then once with Lorca, Garcia Lorca, the poet. I'm forgetting his full name in the moment, but that was painful. That was those were his 2 sexual experiences. So the rest of it was voyeurism. He was very much somebody who liked to watch, and he would watch Gala with other men, and she had many lovers, and he sanctioned these. In fact, when she was like in her 70s and 80s, he bought her a castle that was 50 miles away from their home, where she could entertain her lovers. And one of them was, so in the 70s, so like she was probably in her 70s at the time. And one of them was the star of Jesus Christ Superstar, this American young man who came over basically because she had a lot of money, and he ended up with a ton of Dali paintings that he like ran off with, kind of thing. And he could only visit her at this castle if she had given him a written invitation. So very strange relationship.
Very strange.
But she appears in multiple paintings. She is the muse for the cookbook. It's called the Dîners de Gala. He has a tarot deck that he did.
Right.
Yes, his cookbook. He has a tarot deck that he created, and he is the Il Mago, the magician, and she is the Empress on the tarot card. So, yeah. But she wasn't nice. She wasn't nice
Doesn't
at all.
sound- Not in the book, anyway.
And there is a book coming out in the spring that supposedly is based on new information about her and tries to basically paint a different picture than what has historically been the story of her by multiple people. And that she wasn't a very nice person. She used to hit people at parties. She just wasn't nice. And so that worked well for my villain. I have a couple villains going on in the book, right? But she does not like Julia.
She's maybe the most interesting person in there, aside from Julia. Yeah, she's just, what's she going to do next? We're almost out of time. I want to read a couple of reviews that were striking. Breaking new ground in the Gothic canon, Crystal King's In the Garden of Monsters beguiled me from the very first page. This eerie, sensual, and inventive reimagining of the Persephone myth is a lush fairy tale painted in shadows on a moonlit night. I adored it. This is from Chris Walder, author of Unnatural Creatures, a novel of the Frankenstein women. And another one is, In the Garden of Monsters is a glorious work of Gothic fiction set in Italy's real and strange Sacro Bosco. Underpinned by Crystal King's signature passion for food writing and impeccable research, this novel will pull you in and not let go, just as the titular garden does to the characters. I devoured it as swiftly as a handful of pomegranate seeds. By Alyssa Palumbo, author of the Spellbook of Katrina von Tassel.
Which is a good spooky book to read right now.
Yes. So if you like what we've discussed today, go get In the Garden of Monsters. And it's available in bookstores, Amazon, and
Online?
online.
Yep. Anywhere books are sold.
And at crystalking.com. Some cool events coming up. You're going to be at the Boston Book Festival, October 26th, and the Boston Athenaeum, November 12th, talking about Dali and the Sacro Bosco, which should be fascinating. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, you'll find links to them through our website, capecodwritercenter.org, through our Facebook page, and on YouTube. Thank you for watching Books and the World, and thank you, Crystal King.
Thank you.